Hey everybody, thanks for watching. This is Andrew from Schnauzerface Minis. I've got something completely different today. I've got an early look at the new Vallejo Game Air paint line. What is Vallejo Game Air? Essentially, it's a port of the Vallejo Game Color line with finer pigments that are suitable for airbrushing. While Vallejo Model Air have always been my gold standard for hobby airbrushing, that color range is geared toward military modelers. So the line is dominated by muted tones that are great for painting World War II tanks, but perhaps not for trolls and Tyranids. The Vallejo Game Color line consists of about 80 colors that are typically more saturated and bold when compared to VMA, but their larger pigments just don't work well for precise airbrushing. This new Vallejo Game Air line looks to merge these two concepts to create vibrant airbrush paints for wargamers. The new set includes 48 paints and 8 primers. So if there were 80 Game Color paints, but only 48 Game Air, what's missing and how much are we missing it? Here are the Game Color paints you won't find in Game Air. Now this seems like a lot, but upon closer inspection it does make sense. None of the expanded range from Game Color are included, and I always thought most of those were extremely close to colors that were in their original line, so excluding them makes sense. The only two I'm bummed about losing are the fluorescents, which are fantastic for OSL, but I don't think our community will miss the others. We're also missing 3 dark blues, but VMA already covers those colors with Insignia Blue, Dark Sea Blue, and Intermediate Blue. Similarly, we're short 4 browns, but VMA is littered with browns. We've already got color matches, so there's no need to replicate those either. These greens and Ghost Gray are also covered by Model Air. Now, losing Hammered Copper is a bummer, but I'll explain later why it's actually not that big of a deal. So by my count, we've got 10 Game Color paints that don't have close matches. Losing these jewel tone greens is disappointing, but I do expect Vallejo might expand this line like they've done with their others, so we may get these in the future. On the plus side, Game Air has added a new color, Alien Purple, which is a match for army painters, Alien Purple. Now you guys know I love purple, so I am super excited about this one. Vallejo's polyurethane primers have always been my favorite airbrush primers, and the VGA set comes with 8 shades. Now black, gray, and white are obvious. Ultramarine is a very close but not quite exact color match for the ultramarine paint in the regular line. Pure red is pretty comparable to bloody red. Skeleton bone doesn't have an equal, but it's in the ballpark of a bone white. Leather brown primer looks nothing like the paint named leather brown, but it's roughly equivalent to a beastie brown. The most exciting primer to me was plate mail silver, because I've never used a metallic airbrush primer. Plate mail sprays nicely and cures to a durable finish as far as I can tell. Unfortunately, it dries more matte than I had hoped. It almost looks like a metallic paint after hitting it with some dull coat. This is an interesting concept, but I still suggest priming black and then spraying one of the silvers from the regular line if you want a silver base coat. By now I've used about 2/3 of the paints, and I feel like they cover just as well as VMA, so there's no real change there. But yellow is a notorious pain in the butt, and that was going to be the real test. Game Color Moon Yellow has really weak coverage, so I worried that its pre-thin counterpart might be even worse. I started thinning it 3:1 and I applied it over leather brown. I have to say I was pleasantly surprised with its coverage and also its performance through the airbrush. In my Imperial Fist tutorial you can see I had a lot of trouble shooting VGC yellow, but the VGA yellow flows just as smoothly as the rest of the line. At this point I decided to put the paints through a sort of unrealistic stress test. I over-thinned the yellow to about 1:1 and sprayed it over a black base coat. Now I know we'd never over-thin yellow and try to apply it over black in the real world, but I wanted to see how they performed, and even still it only took about 3 coats to cover, and that's not bad at all. I spent significant time testing out the metallics, as legit airbrush metallics are what we've all clamored for. All 4 VMA silvers are wonderful, but the copper, brass, and gold are way too bright. So let's see if these VGA paints solve some of our problems. VGA silver appears to be the same formula as VMA silver. It sprays perfectly and dries to a smooth, shiny finish without the glittery effect some acrylics can have. VGA chainmail performs just as nicely and is a great mid-tone for silvers. This is one of my favorite paints from the new line. Gunmetal appears slightly darker and more reflective than the VMA black metallic, so if you play Convergence of Cyrus or Grey Knights, this trio is an absolute must. The golds also performed well, but I did have one minor clog at lower air pressure. but they shot just fine when I cleared my airbrush and cranked the PSI to around 25. The VGA pamphlet suggests that these paints need a needle size of at least 0.2 millimeters, and mine is only 0.15, so I'm kind of in the danger zone anyway. And this just happened one time, so it may have been my fault for under-thinning or perhaps not maintaining the airbrush very well. The bronze and brass both look great, and to my eyes they could easily pass for a copper. That's why I'm not too bummed to see hammered copper left out of the VGA line. Overall, these metallics are exactly what I wanted. They mix just fine with inks and other acrylics, so there is a wealth of new options out there. These paints are worth their weight in pre-thinned, finely ground gold. These are billed as airbrush-ready versions of VGC paints, so how closely do VGA colors match their predecessors? I took a sample of about a dozen paints, and I put them side by side. Game Color on the left, Game Air on the right. Hexed Lichen appears a few shades darker in the new line, and Sick Green and Desert Yellow both have slightly different tones as well. Other than that, everything looked reasonably similar. However, the VGA paints dry noticeably more matte than VGC. To see the difference on a model, here's a side-by-side of Bloody Red. Again, Game Color is on the left, and it appears to have a slightly more satin finish. For a fuller look at them in action, here's a quick demo on a Juggernaut. Simply put, these are the airbrush paints we've been waiting for. They work similarly to the VMA paints, but the VGA actually feel a little thinner. I tend to thin VMA 1:1, so that's where I started with these. That seemed too thin, and 2:1 or even 3:1 was more comfortable. Now that's caused a minor learning curve for me. I like to use a lot of drying retarder in my thinning mixture, and by thinning less and reducing the total amount of drying retarder, I have noticed a slight uptick in tip dry. It's not a significant problem, and it's probably one I can solve by altering my thinning mixture. So here's the obvious question. You've already got the full VGC line. Are these worthy of a double dip? In my opinion, absolutely. Aside from one minor instance with a metallic, I didn't experience any clogging, and I've used these for 3 or 4 days now. That's the obvious benefit to an upgrade. The nozzle will stay clear, so I can pull controlled fine lines without the stuttering that comes with larger pigments. These are perfect for detailing and working small models, which really isn't the case with the Game Colors. So how do these stack up against other lines? The performance, coverage, and metallics are of the same high quality we expect from Vallejo. On its own though, the color palette is limited. But the addition of Alien Purple tells me Vallejo is still adding to the line, and I imagine expansions will come out eventually. But think of this line as a supplement to, or a line to be supplemented by, Model Air. Then it becomes one big exhaustive collection that will replace a huge chunk of paints on my shelf. I don't think I'll be reaching for Game Color anytime soon, and these paints will largely eat into my P3 and Reaper time as well. How do they stack up against Minotaur, the other airbrush paints geared toward wargamers? I've been fairly vocal about my disappointment with Minotaur. Some of them dry extremely glossy, some are watered down way past the point of usability, they separate really fast, the varnishes I have found to be useless, the metallics I don't think are even real metallics, the frosted bottles shift the color from the shelf to the palette, and some of them still clog my airbrush after lots of thinning. Now I know some of you guys really like Minotaur, so your mileage may vary, but for me, my mileage has been about that of a 58 Thunderbird. As a quick demo here, these work just about the same as VMA with a bristle brush. The metallics are covering in one pass when thinned 3:1, and even thinned 1:1, they cover thoroughly in about 3 coats. Unfortunately, I don't know when these will be available for sale, but I imagine it's just around the corner. I think these guys are game changers though, so they're worth the wait. I can already tell you guys will be seeing these paints a lot in my upcoming videos, and I imagine you'll be seeing them pop up around the community a lot too. So, be good to each other, and thanks for watching.